Hi everyone, welcome to 21st Century Saints. It's so great to be back with you tonight, a little earlier than we had planned, and we had been on holiday. We've been having a great time, and I am still channeling the rest and relaxation by podcasting from my bed with candles around me and some chilled lighting. So, in that spirit, I invite you all to come and join us. Um, Sara is my wonderful, beloved co-host. Sara, do you want to say hey?
Hi everyone. It's good to be here. We hadn't anticipated being here till October, and on our last podcast, we did say that we thought we would not see any of you until October unless the church did something that drove us to the microphone sooner. And the church has done something that's driven us to a microphone sooner than we planned. But we felt tonight was really important. We felt it was important to make our concerns clear and to speak out for support. So, in a spirit of love and support for our LGBT community, particularly our trans community tonight, we're here. Welcome. Good to be with you all.
And we've missed you all. We talk about you often. Just before we introduce our guests, over the summer, Sara and I got to meet over the summer a couple of times actually, which is quite unusual for someone who spends most of their time in these four walls. Yeah, I've been able to socialise this year and got to see my mate, and we have to fit a lot of memory making into a very short space of time. So yes, I proposed eternal love. Yeah, she's going to be my best girl forever. Don't have a ring. But yeah, the entire planet has been wishing as well, and yeah, it's so great that we're buddies forever. And thank you for all the great wishes that we've had and all the confused questions around it. I am still very happily married to Charlie, can I just say? And I don't know if Sarah's in the same market. I don't know. Send in your CVs if
If a good woman,
yeah,
comes my way, Jane, I may be there.
yeah, right.
Good woman comes my way.
We can
Might
maybe
make things very complicated, but
between us,
hey
yeah, it
ho.
might. Yeah,
We'll work that one out. We'll work that one out. I
yeah.
mean,
So
at the
we've been
risk of being
having a lot of fun.
extremely flippant, very early on in the broadcast, Joseph said it was okay to marry other men's wives, so I don't see it as a conflict. But
And it was
I'm being naughty early on. But yeah, if a good woman comes my way, then
yeah.
might be in the market.
The proposal photographs looked obscene, and if you have not yet seen them,
I
come
did have
and
that pointed out to
contact me
me.
on Facebook.
It was pointed out to me that our kissing was not acceptable, but never mind. Let's not worry about that. It was great.
We shared a cake pop.
That's all we did. That is all we did.
Is all. It's not our fault what people's minds do to that. Anyway, yes, so we're trying to say we're having a summer of fun, building relationships,
We
and
had
it's
some
been
fantastic
really good
spiritual
healing time.
experiences,
Yeah.
and I think that's actually really important to note. We had some fantastic opportunities to worship together, even if it was just the two of us, and to pray together and to sing together and to think about the gospel in our lives and how we can sort of further our relationship with Christ. We had opportunities to do that together as well.
Yeah. And it's been safe. And that's a word that I think we're going to be talking about tonight, and it's also going to be super relevant. You know, we'll talk about our summer when we're ready to talk about us now that I've got that out my system. Yeah, had to make it about me before I started. Anyway, yeah, so before we get into the reasons why we're here, I'd love to introduce our guests tonight. So first of all, we have one of our dearest friends from the earliest days of the Brit Avengers, our friend Debbie Squires Coleman. Do you want to say hey?
Hiya, evening everybody.
And could you maybe share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what your Mormonism experience is?
Yeah, I'm from Essex. I've been a member of the church since I was about 16. I am church attending, temple attending, and love the people.
Yeah,
Love it.
yeah. She is such a great supporter, Debbie, of people and relationships. And back when we were first talking, as Brit Avengers and telling the world about what's happening in the UK, we were talking about some of the really what we felt was innovative stuff that was happening, often led by relief societies, by women. It was such an exciting time, and Debbie had played such a huge part in that, and had led some really, or was part of organising some really incredible sort of online um, sessions that were just so inclusive and incredible, and were a great vision for everything that we aspire for Relief Society to be, and yeah, sort of more broadly. So thank you for all the incredible work that you have done and that you clearly continue to do, and we're going to talk a little bit about that shortly. Um, I'd also like to introduce someone else who's very dear to us. Valerie Green, do you want to say hey and tell the world a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Hello. My voice is feeling weird because I recently had jaw surgery and I'm trying to talk properly again. I can still feel most of my face at this point, but not all of it. I'm a transgender woman. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. Been a member for over 50 years. My mother joined when I was about 6 years old, and I've been fortunate to be in a very welcoming ward. I've been in this ward for over 30 years, and they went through some changes when I went through when I introduced some changes to them, and I've been very happy with the ward that I've been in. Looks like things may get worse from a top-down standpoint, though. Not happy about that.
Yeah. And I've always been really inspired because your story, your life not only has been incredibly inspiring, but also it has allowed people to step up and show the very best of what Latter-day Saint experience can be. And you have spoken very publicly about that. So I'm excited to sort of hear a little bit more when we get to about what your experiences has been like, and how maybe we could see that reflected. That I guess we're at a time just now where we don't really know what this is going to look like in practice. It sounds very, very harsh. It sounds draconian, I would say. So what I'm going to do for our audience who haven't yet heard, or just for the sake of clarity, um, so that we know what we're talking about, I am going to read. Now, this was announced 2 days ago.
Yeah, Monday
Just
the
as,
yeah.
yeah, just as people in the UK were heading to bed. So yeah, so it would have been the 19th of August 2024. And this is an update to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Handbook of Instructions. And it is specifically referencing church participation of individuals who identify as transgender. So I'm just going to take us through it so that we all know what we're talking about. Some of this information has been condensed online, and so I think it would be helpful if we have a look at it. And we will put this in the show notes for your reference too. So this document supplements the policy in the General Handbook. I'm going to quote from here on in. General guidelines. In all cases, local leaders seek spiritual guidance. Treat individuals and their families with love and respect while teaching gospel truth. Consider the needs of the individual and other ward members. Ensure that the Church's doctrine on gender is not undermined or misunderstood. Seek counsel. Bishops counsel with the stake president. Stake and mission presidents seek guidance from the area presidency. Involve the parents or guardian of minors. Preferred names and pronouns. Official church records reflect a member's biological sex at birth. The use of preferred names and pronouns should be a matter left between individuals and their family friends, and church members. Local leaders should not determine or prescribe how members address an individual. If a member has a preferred name, it may be noted in the preferred name field on the membership record. Gender-specific meetings and activities. Individuals attend gender-specific meetings and activities that align with their biological sex at birth. Any exception, which should be rare, must adhere to the general guidelines listed above and be approved by the area presidency. Overnight activities. For overnight activities that are for a specific gender, individuals attend only the camps that align with their biological sex at birth. Examples of such activities include young women camps and Aaronic priesthood quorum camps. For overnight activities that are not for a specific gender, individuals who pursue surgical, medical, or social transition away from their biological sex at birth leave the activity at night. Youth are released to the care of a parent or legal guardian who is responsible for arranging accommodations. Examples of activities that are not for a specific gender include young single adult conferences, for the strength of youth conferences and youth conferences. Callings and assignments. Individuals who pursue surgical, medical, or social transition away from their biological sex at birth are not called or assigned to 1. Fulfill gender-specific roles, 2. Serve as teachers, or 3. Work with children or youth. They may receive other callings or assignments that provide opportunities to progress and serve others. Restrooms in church facilities. Restrooms should provide a private and safe environment. Care must be taken to respect the privacy and dignity of all individuals. Individuals who pursue surgical, medical, or social transition away from their biological sex at birth should use a single occupancy restroom when available. If a single occupancy restroom is not available, a local leader consults with the individual and the parents or guardian of a youth to find a solution. Options include using a restroom that aligns with the individual's biological sex at birth, using a restroom that corresponds to the individual's feeling of their inner sense of gender, with a trusted person ensuring that others are not using the restroom at the same time. Now, that is the entirety of the document. I should have said beforehand, I apologise for any. I apologise, I know how hard that is. It's difficult to read, it is difficult to hear, and it is extremely difficult and painful for people who this applies to and those who care for them. Could we perhaps start with some basics? What are we talking about when we talk about those different types of transition? So it talked there about medical, biological and social. Valerie, would you maybe speak to us a little bit about what transition actually is, what transgender actually is?
Sure. Although those are two different questions.
Absolutely.
Just to the basics, transgender is simply having a life experience, sometimes only in your head, that differs from the way society would expect you to be based upon your secondary sexual characteristics, usually referring to genitalia or breasts. And that's generally a transgender experience. And then you can be transgender, not transition, but you experience life that way. But most often, being transgender eventually leads to transition to some degree. And then they talk about those different levels of transition. The first one is social, and especially this is what might be used with a child, where you simply are changing the way your hair is arranged, The clothes that you wear, maybe your name is changed. You're just called by a different name. But social transition is all about outward appearances to the rest of the world. To the person who's transitioning, it's about a lot more than that. Medical transition would typically mean HRT, hormone replacement therapy, which would involve testosterone blockers, maybe for someone who is male to female, and adding an estrogen of one of various forms. And then the other side for male to female would be adding an estrogen. And I don't know if they use blockers for estrogen. I've never had to worry about that, and I've never really looked at it. But so medical is often lumped together with surgical. And surgical would mean going through the processes to remove or alter secondary sexual characteristics. For female to male, it often means, or for non-binary people, it can mean breast removal or breast reductions. And it could mean alterations of the genitals. There's like 20 different processes that they go through, but it's what most people would use to refer to as a sex reassignment surgery, possibly removing whatever genitalia someone has at this point and making it appear and function as what we would typically and commonplace refer to as the opposite sex. Non-binary people might find a medium anywhere between those two extremes. So those are the yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because what we're talking about in the handbook is, I feel like the language around it is it's extremes. It's anywhere from where it's not a single process. There are there are many stages, many years, many checkpoints, many conversations with all sorts of medical professionals, family members, right along the way to social transition, which many transgender people, for that's sufficient, and non-binary people quite often that's where they land, and for some no decision is ever really made. They're often quite happy to not tell anyone that they're trans, for different reasons, often fear, lack of support. What my concern is that when someone is socially transitioning, it's literally beginning with, I would like to change my pronouns, or I would like to try this pronoun because this may affirm how I feel, and see what that's like. Does it affirm how I feel? And start to have those conversations. Those conversations, even beginning within an individual, now become the remit of a church organization. And that's a lot. Do you mind me asking, when, for you, when did you understand your gender? What did that journey look like for you?
For me, I will say that I felt different from my earliest memories. We're talking 4 and 5 years old. And I thought maybe it was because I was raised in an environment that was mostly my mother and my sister and my aunts. And so I was in a very strongly female environment. But I look back at things and I'm going, oh, there were signs. There were definite signs. And then when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I came across a news article about, what's her name? Dr. Renee Richards, who was the first professional, as far as we know, only professional transgender professional tennis player. And I was reading that article when I discovered that you could actually transition, and I immediately knew that this was, it felt completely right. It was what I wanted. but I wasn't going to tell anyone. At the time, I was still living in Lubbock, Texas, and I read a couple of years ago that Lubbock, Texas is the second most conservative city in the United States, second only behind Provo, Utah, which I thought that was funny. So that was not a place for someone to be transitioning. And so I didn't tell anyone. I didn't admit to another human being in person until I was in my late 30s before I ever told me. And that was a therapist that I spoke to. And it was shortly after that that I told my spouse about it. And so she knew about it for 20 years. But so this was, you know, not understanding it, but knowing I was different until from a very early age, finding all the language when I was 10, 11 years old, knowing what I wanted in life, and then just suppressing it as I went through all the typical normal young male Mormon experience, you know, getting married, having kids, doing all of those things until at one point I started looking for other answers, and I even started a Yahoo news group for Mormon crossdressers to find other people. And I was surprised to find anyone. I had no idea the community was so big. So anyway, through those years, I would do things in private. It was mostly dressing in private. It was not. I did not consider myself unfortunate to have a single mom who was at work when I was at home, and I had access to all of her clothing. So for the longest time, I identified as a crossdresser because that was the extent of what I could get to. Anyway, so that was happening all through the time. I informed my wife about it. She was appalled. We agreed not to do anything, not even tell the children. In fact, I didn't specifically tell most of my children until after she passed away. I told one of my oldest son when I went on a trip because I wanted him to know where I was. I didn't want him to be surprised if he had to contact me. And when I was telling him, my youngest daughter, who was supposed to be asleep, overheard that discussion. And so I had a conversation with her as well. But we didn't do anything formal until with the other children until after my wife had passed away. And then I thought I would still live a dual life the rest of my life until one day I was at a play because I had reached the point where I was now going out socially, as I should have been. And I was sitting at a play during intermission, and I just looked around and I said, well, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm waiting for anything. And that was the moment I decided it was transition in time. And that was in 2018. So that's when I determined that it would be full social transition by 2019. And just things have moved on from there.
Yeah, what has the world been like? So 2018, we hear a lot more about transgender experience in the media now. Could you talk a little bit about what your experience of has been since you started that process more publicly?
Yeah, I think it kind of hit a tipping point. In fact, there was a Time magazine had the article with the headline on the front called "The Transgender Tipping Point." When the woman for Orange Is the New Black, I've never watched it, and I can't remember her name.
Laverne Cox, yeah.
Laverne Cox, yeah. So she made the headlines. That was a big deal. Shortly after that, Caitlyn Jenner announced her transition. So the world seemed to be getting prepped for it. And then, of course, we watched I don't know what it was like in other countries, but we watched South Carolina try to go through a bathroom ban. They got defeated. And so there was this push from conservative groups to limit the life experiences of transgender people that kind of got beaten down for a while. And then in the last 4 years, it's just erupted. In fact, I used to be, from the United States, a staunch Republican until I realized that, I was only Republican because I was told to be. And when I really looked at issues, I was like, I don't believe any of this stuff. So that's been a big change for me. Now, as far as transitioning, I was lucky. I went at work. There are several things that any person who's going to transition is afraid of. Am I going to lose my friends? Am I going to lose my family? Am I going to lose my community, typically church? And am I going to still be able to have a job? So those were some pretty big things. From my standpoint, my family hadn't been told in the early phases, but when I did tell my family, there was absolutely no issues. All my children were accepting, my aunts were accepting, my extended family, not a word of contention from any of them. So that was good. That came after work. They started a group at work. What do they call them? Employee resource groups for the LGBTQ community. And I went to an organizing meeting because someone invited me. And they invited me because they'd noticed that I've been wearing nail polish and I had my ears pierced. And they were like, they were cautious about inviting me. But I went to this, and that was the first time I admitted to anyone at work that I was transgender, even though I obviously hadn't transitioned at the time. And after that meeting, the person organizing it, who was from a different location, came and found me and wanted me to know that if concerns about work were an issue, then it wasn't a problem because everything was already protected under our human resources policies. Gender expression, gender identities, everything was protected. That was nice to know. So block number 2 fallen over. Then it was church and community, and I'd found community in the cross-dressing community here in St. Louis, and that was as far as we went with the community. Church was probably one of the biggest ones, and at some point, it was in 2018. Once I made that decision, sitting in that audience at that play, I went to my fairly new bishop and informed him of what was happening. And I think it was important. I didn't go ask for absolution or a blessing or counseling or anything. I just went in and I said, look, I'm transgender. I'm transitioning on January 1st, 2019, and I just want to know, will I still be welcome here? It's all in your court. So what are you going to do? So that led to an hour-long discussion where I had to teach him what transgender meant, and what transition meant. And at the time, I had not planned on surgical transition. And his response was, well, I don't see any problem. And I said, well, I assure you someone will. And it was about a month later, I wound up having a conversation with the stake president, who put several restrictions on me. I was released from all of my callings. I was given restrictions that are very similar to what we're now seeing in this policy, that were unofficial. But I knew that they existed within the structure of the church, and I was prepared for them. So I wasn't surprised, but I was still determined to continue going where I thought I needed to be for a couple of reasons. One is I had what I call a reverse faith crisis. It was like, you can just walk away and nobody will say a word to you. They'll probably be glad to see you leave. Or do you really want to stay here? And at that point, I was like, yeah, I think I really want to stay here. It's a lifelong thing for me. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be there whether they like it or not, I guess. All visitors are welcome. And so I stayed, and then they said the restrictions were going to be put in place, and I asked them when. Mind you, this was in like September. And I told them I was transitioning in January, the following January. And the stake president looked at me and said, well, I can see that you have pierced ears and you're wearing studs. That's not a problem. And in my mind, I was thinking, it's not. That's a surprise to me. Then he said, and I see you've grown your nails out and you're wearing nail polish. He said, well, I guess with those two things, the restrictions would need to start now. And my response in my head was, that's funny. I've looked exactly like this for the last 2 years, and no one said a word while I taught the senior youth Sunday school classes. But suddenly now it's an issue because you know something about me. Before that, it was just kind of a hidden thing. And so he said, well, I guess with these two things, it should start right now. And I said, that's okay, that's fair. So in that case, rather than wait till January, I'll just transition now. And so I said, I'll give my bishop notification so that it's coming. And because I wanted him to inform the ward council so that the leaders knew what was going on so they weren't caught by any surprise. And then 3 weeks later, I just showed up at church without telling anybody what was going on. And there were lots of interesting stories that came out of that. For the most part, it's been very welcoming at church. That first day, all the leaders came over and expressed their support individually. At that time, I was unfortunately banned from all gendered meetings. So it's similar to what we're doing now. So I wasn't allowed to go to anything that was considered male or female. It was just, you can't go to any of those meetings. And that was that way for a year and a half. And funnily enough, I had told my bishop, I said, you know, things change. And what happened was about 18 months later, well, not even quite 18 months, the new handbook came out in 2020. And based upon that handbook, my Relief Society president, who I'd had lots of conversations with before, she actually called me the day those changes came out and said, I'm already on it with the bishop. She had advocated before for my inclusion in Relief Society. And when the new handbook came out that said you're welcome to all meetings, she got him on the phone and said, that says all meetings, and she should be in my Relief Society. And there was consultation, and I actually went through it line by line with the stake president about the entire transgender policy, and we only disagreed on one thing, and that was the gender is determined by your sex assigned at birth, especially your eternal gender. But so I was invited to Relief Society, and so I've been a member or participating in Relief Society for the last 4 years. This still won't change anything that allows me to show up that way in the roles of the church or on the roles of classes or anything, but that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years, and it's been wonderful to be able to participate that way. And the rest of church has been really good. I've had conversations with people who struggled. They've told me of their struggles. I've heard conversations about discussions that happened in other homes about what this meant and who I was. It helps that I was in this ward for I've been in this ward for now 32 years. And so most of the people, we roll over a lot. We have a ward that has got a lot of older people in it, but then we live in an area that's close to medical schools, so we have a lot of turnover of the younger crowd as they come in for school and then leave. So we have a lot of new, young, progressive ideas coming in. And we also have some rather older ideas that probably surprised themselves when they found out they weren't maybe not quite as conservative as they thought they were. There are some that are still quite conservative, but church has been a good experience where I'm at. I'm grateful for that. I think it has to do with where I'm at and the longevity that I have, the relationships that I've had over a long time with some of these people, because they were able to see that this is the same person that they've always known, that now they just perceive me differently. I think that made a good help. Work has been great. I went through work. I worked with HR, and they put everything in place, set everything up for day one. And then it was a day I just came in. And then family was just all gradual. So my experience has been like a Cinderella story in society and all those areas where there are usually so many concerns for someone who's transitioning. And I know I'm lucky, and I know it's a Cinderella story, and I know it's like a unicorn existence. But every once in a while, someone just decides to, kick you in the butt or something and make something not quite work out well. I've written a couple of things about the experiences, especially when I was not allowed to go to any of the meetings. And I used to kind of rub it in my bishop's face when we would have combined meetings on fifth Sundays or something, and I would make a point of backing him into a corner and asking, is this an all adults meeting or is it an elders quorum and relief society meeting? And if it was all adults, I would go, but if it wasn't, I'm like, I guess I can't go to that one. So, and occasionally that's what it was, but I was still making the point, like, this is what you're doing to exclude someone simply by naming a meeting the way you've done it at this point. So anyway, so my experience has been really good, which has allowed me to spend some time working with other people online and being a resource to other people, especially helping them understand what they might and might not face.
So I mean, I love that the LDS and post LDS trans community that I'm friends with, um, for the most part, are either quite young and are doing the job of educating, educating people like me who have all of this learning to do and better understanding to do. Um, I love that you get to experience Relief Society the way you should. Your sister in Relief Society, and I feel so much more delighted to be part of a women's organisation that includes all women. And so I would feel walking into your ward, I would feel safe. That's a wonderful thing. Up until this week, how have you been able to serve in the church after those restrictions happened? What does it look like at the
So
moment?
yeah, at the moment I'm the ward bulletin person. A nice generic thing to give to someone. And prior to that, I was serving as technically I'm not released. I'm on the activities committees. We do our big things were the Christmas thing and the Labor Day stuff. We have new activities committee leaders who seem to be wanting to do the things themselves. They seem to have forgotten that there was a committee that they were called to be a head of, and I'm fine with that. So it's less things for me to do. But at the moment I'm doing the ward bulletin that goes out every week, and we're having a little battle because the bishop is like, "Can you do a printed version of that?" And I'm like, "No." I mean, I will, but you're going to decide what it looks like. Because I'm not going to present designs to you and have it done that way. We're gonna go through this process in such a way that as you tell me what it is we're gonna do the requirements definition first, and then I'll put something together. But what we do right now is too big to go in a printed bulletin. We're going to discuss this. So when you get back to me about what that's supposed to look like, then we'll discuss it. It's been months and I haven't heard a word. So
I love an assertive woman.
every once in a
I
while
love
they'll
it.
ask again, and I'll go, "Have you given me any requirements?" Oh, okay, I guess we haven't. Okay.
So do you have ministering assignments? Are you formally asked to be looking out for any particular people at
I do
church?
not. I do not. My Relief Society president's changed twice
Okay.
since then. Um, my first Relief Society president was very supportive. My second was also very supportive. Both wanted to give me ministering assignments. Neither was allowed to.
Okay.
However, they did make a point of assigning me a ministering couple rather than ministering brothers and sisters, because that was the closest she could get to giving me ministering sisters. And most of my interactions with the sister, who I've known for quite some time, and I've got some other stories about her interactions and allyship. Anyway, so when I was that's who I have now. And before that, I had another ministering couple, and that ministering couple was replaced when he was called to be the current bishop. So, but they also were very welcoming, and in fact, when they were called to be a ministering couple, my Relief Society president, told them why, and their response was, "That's the best reason I've ever heard for giving someone to us as a ministering couple." So I've been very lucky to have very supportive leaders in my ward.
And it sounds like there are so many possibilities for how leaders would have you serve and have you bless other people and how they would serve you, and to be even more sort of you know you're this incredible resource in a community, and wouldn't it be wonderful to sort of see them? It's almost like their hands are tied and they're unable to fully use you as you could be used, or serve you as you could be served, right?
Every time I've been given restrictions, I've been given that by someone who I could tell did not want to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm a member of the I'm on the board of the Emmaus LGBTQ ministry, which is our goal is to be both church affirming and radically LGBTQ affirming, and especially to help people navigate what it's like to be in the church the way it is, to express our hope that the church changes, and to try to educate people on how to work with their local leaders. One of the things that we've been told, we've had discussions at the highest levels in the church, and we've been told that things happen from the bottom up, and that this is what we're doing is what needs to happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be working all the time.
Right.
But we certainly know that the body of the church, the members of the church, when we encounter them, for the most part, are very welcoming, open, and loving. And most of the issues that we have are with the institution itself.
I want to just take this moment, just if there is anyone who's listening at the moment and who has questions about um, the nature of God's perception of transgender people, the family proclamation, and all of those things that are presented. I'm going to just take this moment just to sort of suggest I'm not going to cover that tonight, unless one of the guests want to bring it up. They can feel free, but um, this is your job to listen to the lived experience. This is your job to hear, and if there is anything that you're feeling that you've been told somewhere that God doesn't make mistakes, that there shouldn't be these issues with people wanting, choosing, deciding to change gender, then I'm going to ask that you look at the medical research and organizations which are supporting people who are transgender, to look at the rates of violence that transgender people, your homework on that. Now, before I come to my other two guests, I also wanted to just acknowledge someone who had planned to be here tonight, a young person who had planned to share their experience as a transgender, non-binary young person. Now, so at the last minute, they've decided that it's not, they're not going to come on. They're going to sleep, rest it out, and as absolutely they should. You see, it's not their job to educate us. It's so gracious that Valerie and um, other transgender people are giving us their time to do that and to share their voice. But you're paying a price for it. And I just really want to honour the fact that you're taking that time to help us understand what you and others are experiencing. I want to just, though, mention a little bit about their experience as a transgender young person. Some of the things that we had talked about in preparation for tonight's episode this week was that particularly young people may be affected by this. Older people, where there is a relationship already in the church and the dynamics are almost kind of known, that they're a known quantity. What we may find is that people who haven't experienced the church before, who have lived their entire lives as and the gender that they are having to have or are expected to have conversations about something that is just not relevant in their lives anymore, things that they don't have to declare to employers, or that's almost a footnote, if at all, on their medical records. To see people have to take a step back and then psychologically have to go through well what they're being put through in these policies is going to be extremely traumatic. But I think especially at the vulnerable age of young people, it's extremely difficult. Now, we've spoken on the show before about my young trans child's friend, Lucy, did not make it. Lucy died by suicide 2 years ago now, and is still remembered frequently in our home, and most certainly in my child's life. Lucy was 16 years old, and Lucy had just begun the process of transition. Lucy had started growing out her hair and being called Lucy. Lucy had worn nail polish to school that week for the first time, and was confident that this is who she is. And statistically, when you are a young person, or even an older trans person, but I'm particularly thinking about young people at the moment, you are particularly at risk of suicide, of completing suicide. Not only are trans people more likely to experience violence, bullying, harassment, sexual assault, they are also more likely to experience suicidal ideation because of the lack of acceptance that comes along with having to have these conversations with other people, fear of rejection from families, individuals, and their communities. My child came to live with us to keep them safe because they had been rejected by their birth family, and I have the privilege of being able to step into that role and learn from them as we get to grow together as their chosen family. And I just want to honour the pain that so many adults are difficult to find someone to talk to. If you are affected by any of the issues that we're talking about tonight, we are going to put some helpline numbers in the comments, but just know that you can call emergency services if you are distressed. And I hope that we're going to be able to continue to demonstrate as we talk that there is a community who loves you, and that you are valid, and that you are perfect, and that God made you perfect. So with that, I'd like to ask your church is the church I love. Talk to me a little bit about how you see the possibilities for inclusion, for belonging, and maybe talk a little bit about some of your thoughts about what's happened this week. I know that's big and very broad.
So you were cutting out
Debbie,
a little
did you?
bit for me. I'm not sure we know who you were
Oh, I'm
asking.
so sorry. Okay, I'm so sorry. So that was for Debbie. Debbie, if you are okay to talk a little bit about your experience of what the possibilities are in church. I apologise for my sucky internet signal. It's a little bit stormy here in Scotland, as it is summer. That's what we get. Yeah, but Debbie, could you talk about the possibilities for inclusion and belonging, and what you've seen this week and how you've felt this week?
There's been a lot of sadness there, and a lot of anger as well. And I just can reiterate the word you used about Valerie, and Valerie, you talking about your story and your life. You've been so gracious, so thank you for that, because I know it must be hard. The policy, I feel that when I listen to you talking, Valerie, that, and I might have got this wrong, so please correct me if I haven't, but I feel that there must have been a lot of loneliness there and separateness there that you've had to work through. And yeah.
Yeah, there was some, especially when you feel excluded from so many things, which I thought was interesting because I've been in lots of conversations about this new policy over the last few days, and I mentioned that I was not going to be able to attend Relief Society anymore, and some people have responded, and this was on the church newsroom announcement, and they're like, "Well, it doesn't matter where you're at in the building. You know, you're there to worship God, right? And so why does it matter if you can't go to, you know, are you just there for social stuff?" And that's what they think. I didn't respond to those. I had some things to say, but I thought it would not be helpful to say them. But to say, you know, hey, you know, I know of no other woman who is excluded from Relief Society. And I don't think they even realize what it would be like to be told, hey, you can't come. And a friend of mine who once we were having a conversation like this, and she said, you know, I've never in my life gone to church anywhere in the world and walked in and wondered if I was welcome in a meeting. It's just, it's status quo. And so she said, I can't even comprehend what that must be like. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that level of loneliness, and it's not so much loneliness, it's exclusion.
Yeah.
What is it like to be told you are not allowed to be here?
Yeah, that's what I felt when I was listening to your story, and as a community, I feel that that's what we're supposed to be preventing, and so that's why I feel really sad, because we only usually separate people from us if we not as the authorities feel someone's sinned, and maybe disfellowships them or excommunicates them. And this is not about sin. This is about being human and being who you are. And so I've found it very difficult this week. One of my friend's daughters, who's gay, was questioning how we can. She wasn't pointing the finger at me, but I accepted the criticism that I'm staying in an organisation that harms people. And I must admit, just as in 2015, I'm holding my head in shame a bit. And that makes me really sad. And I've got no authority to say sorry for anybody else, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this is causing such harm. And I hope that you feel that your friends are putting their arms around you and that God is using them to put his arms around you.
I personally have heard from many people, and I know they're reaching out to others as well. There's definitely a community that is concerned.
Yeah. And I trust my local community that they will continue to do that to brothers and sisters who are trans, that they will continue to put their arms around them.
And I'm gonna quote that everywhere. It's the community that you're trusting, and the lack of authority hasn't stopped you saying the words "I'm sorry," or on your social media pages tonight. It's very, very powerful. You have claimed that, and I just really appreciate that. Sara, could we talk about, well, I'm going to ask you to speak about two things. I just feel like saving time and just throwing double-barreled questions at everyone tonight. Talk to me about how this has affected you. And then if you would talk to me about that subject that we always talk about here, safeguarding. But talk to me about you first.
It's been a profoundly disturbing week, profoundly disturbing to see the church actually saying very publicly and very clearly that they believe the will and the word of God is that they treat our trans brothers and sisters in this way. And that is what has deeply disturbed me, is that we have, and I don't expect anyone to collude in my criticism here of the First Presidency or the leadership of the church, but it's what I feel. We have a First Presidency and a leadership of the church that actually believe the will of God at this moment in time is that we treat our trans brothers and sisters with rejection, alienation, and exclusion. I cannot see God in that. I don't know where God is in that. I've written to my state president this week and asked him to explain to me where God is in that, because I don't understand it. So I don't know what response I will get. I know it will be a loving response, I know that much. But what we've got here is we have got a church that is calling themselves the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that is actually acting in a way that is showing profound rejection and unfavourable treatment to a group of people who are legally protected as a group that are known to be vulnerable. And they have legal protected characteristics in law, and our church has seen fit to exclude and alienate. If we take the word trans out of the policy that the church has written and substitute it for Mormon, we would hear cries of persecution, religious vilification. Just for 1 second, and I won't take many minutes, I've got a few things to say. Imagine we read this. Mormons can no longer participate in any overnight activities, and they must be escorted away from the activity. Mormons can no longer hold callings or work or volunteer with youth or children. Mormons can put forward their preferred name if they want, but nobody will be told to use it. Mormons are no longer allowed to fully participate in single adult conferences for the strength of youth or youth conferences. Mormons can no longer hold teaching responsibilities. If single occupancy bathrooms are not available in a church building, Mormons should find an alternative solution. Options include a trusted person checking that no one else is in the toilets at the same time as a Mormon. Participation of a Mormon in a gender-specific class should be limited and rare. We would have the church shouting as loudly as they could shout about taking legal action, about suing people, about claiming bigotry, religious hatred. We would see that. And yet they have promoted a policy that they are clearly proud of, because they would not do it if they didn't believe it's the will of God. So they clearly believe that they are doing absolutely the right thing in treating this group that way. I find that incredibly difficult to cope with and to manage, and to have any truck or respect with at all. It also worries me greatly that when the policy of exclusion was introduced in 2015, that happened at a time when President Monson was very ill. A lot of other people were directing what was happening because of his ill health. We have Elder Oaks on the First Presidency who has spoken out against LGBT people and driven a stake through our hearts on so many times with things that he's spoken and said about gay people and trans people. He's there in the First Presidency And we know Russell M. Nelson is possibly not a well man because he's not seen much. So how much is Elder Oaks influencing this? And is this a start of us seeing some doubling down and retrenchment on some of the minuscule progress that the church was making in these areas? Are we going backwards? That concerns me. The other thing that concerns me greatly is the people who will decide whether this policy is enacted are the priesthood leaders and members on the ground. Bishops and stake presidents do not have to implement this policy. They can actually dig a little deep, they can find a little courage, and they can say, not in my name. Members can dig a little deep, and they can find a little courage, and they can say to their trans brothers and sisters, if you can't go to Relief Society or priesthood, come sit with me and I'll study with you instead of going into that lesson. We're sitting and we'll study together in the foyer. Come on, let's find a classroom that's empty. We'll go sit, study together. And they can do that. People can rewrite the words of the primary song, I'll walk with you, I'll talk with you, because we're not walking and talking with anyone, are we? And we can add some words to all are welcome on the visitor sign to say, well, conditionally, you might be welcome. We have a little bit of a vetting process and see how welcome you truly are. And that's how I feel about what is happening at the moment. It scares me. It scares me for what it means for me personally. It scares me for what is happening to my trans and LGBT brothers and sisters, what is happening to them. It scares me for people like Lucy and Lucy's family and the future Lucys that are going to come along and are going to be impacted by this, and Lucy's friends. It's a harsh reality that what we're seeing now, and whether this policy is acted and taken on board by the church, comes down to the individual moral compass and courage of every individual in this church. And if every bishop and every stake president says this does not fit with my moral compass, and you go to Relief Society, you go to priesthood, the policy will fall flat on its face. If members say we're not accepting this, it will fall flat on its face and they very quickly have to reverse it. But people have got to step up and find an individual moral compass now. There's something I read on Facebook some time ago, and I'm so sorry I can't remember who said it because I'd like to attribute it, but it said that if you are claiming to be an ally or a friend of somebody who is suffering in any way whatsoever from like a group that's been persecuted, racism, homophobia, transphobia, whatever, and you're not getting hit by the same stones that they are getting hit by, you're not standing close enough. So if people think they're standing close enough to support our trans brothers and sisters at the moment, and they're not getting hurt in some way by the stance they're having to take, they're not actually standing close enough. Now, what all this means for my ongoing membership of the church, I don't know yet. Those are discussions yet to take place. And I'm saying nothing about where that is at the moment, except those discussions will have to take place at some point. The other thing to say is in my role, and I do have a stake calling, I'm a stake safeguarding specialist, which is a unique role we have in the UK that they don't have anywhere else at the moment, Valerie, so you might not kind of be that familiar with it. But we've got a responsibility to try and improve safeguarding within the church. There's some horrific problems with this safeguarding around this. First of all, the church have never publicly made a clear statement on how they manage the risk of violent, sexually aggressive, sexually predatory, sexually abusive, or physically violent people in the church, and what safeguards they put in place to prevent harm. They've never said how they do that, and yet they're alluding to the fact that there's something they've got to do around trans people because at night time they can't be in an activity. These are human beings, not vampires. They're going to turn into some vampire creature overnight.
And let me just jump in there, Sarah, because I mean we're joking about that, and we're saying vampires. No, we're saying vampires. You know, sort of to to be comedic, but the church is actually suggesting
behaving that way.
implicitly something that sinister that is actually so much
Absolutely.
worse. It's
That's
suggesting
right.
that something at night is going to take place, and it goes back
Right.
to this rhetoric that sort of, you know, the miracle of forgiveness days, the, you know, Boy K. Packard days, when we would hear violent rhetoric and, you know,
Yes.
suggesting that anyone who's in the LGBTQ community are therefore sexual predators, and that is what this looks like.
Yeah.
And I think that's what leads to the anger. It's that
Right. It is. And that's, and you've got this
dehumanizing.
point. Yeah, you can't be in the toilets unless you're the only person in the toilets. Well, have they stopped to think about somebody who the vast majority of people at church may look at and see and recognize as a man or a woman, but that might not have been their assigned gender at birth, but they may present in such a way that I think of a trans friend of mine who has facial hair, looks like a man, talks like a man, lives like a man, is a man, but assigned gender at birth was female. But for years has been living as a man. Some people in the church and the world don't even know that was their assigned gender at birth. It would be
Right.
profoundly disturbing for them to now suddenly walk into the women's toilets at church and say, well, this is where I have to be. Profoundly disturbing for people in there because they think, hang on, you're a man, what are you doing in here? They're not
And
thinking through the implications. This is going to have unintended consequences. And we've been here before with the church. They don't think it through. It's hugely problematic with a very harsh reality that there will be, and forgive me, in mid-rant, I need to shut the door because my family have now all come home. Right.
And
So what we're seeing is we are going to see a deterioration in the mental health and the spiritual health and the well-being of vulnerable people. We're going to see people feeling justified in being discriminatory and inclusionary because, well, you know, the prophet has said it's okay. The prophet has said you shouldn't come to anything overnight, and the prophet said you can't be in the same toilets as me, and the prophet has said you can't be in the same lesson as me. So we're actually saying to people, if you want to bully, if you want to discriminate, if you want to behave that way, we believe that's what God wants, so it's okay, go ahead, do it. And it's extremely difficult to find anything anywhere that redeems itself in how the church are acting at this moment in time. And I come back to you, put Mormon instead of trans, and what does it say?
so, Valerie, you were going to say something, and then I'll come to Debbie.
I don't know what it might have been. Just go
That's
to
okay, because I have more
Sorry.
questions.
When
Let's
I'm
do
on
Debbie
full
first.
rant, I just
Debbie,
So
will we hear from you? Mhm.
yeah, I often wonder actually how difficult it must be to be a prophet and a president of an organization. It feels that that one person is trying to fulfill two different roles, and there's often going to be conflicts, and that wasn't always the way that the prophet was the president, but now that's how it is. So whereas a prophet maybe would be looking after the spiritual welfare of a group of people, or calling people out for not looking after each other, and then we've got a president of a church who is looking after the church, the body of the church, the policies, the financial side of the church. Is this a legal thing? Is this to prevent legal difficulties coming up down the road?
I would have no doubt. You can go back and
almost
look at,
certainly.
yeah, you can go back and look at, I mean, Oakes has had a thing for LGBTQ since he wrote that document in 1984.
Yeah.
And he's a lawyer, and he knows what he's saying sometimes, and sometimes that's why I'm appalled at what he says, because he's a lawyer and he knows what the effective words are.
And I think also we can't separate what we're seeing here with what's happening in the political arena, particularly in America. I mean, we have problems with it here, but not to the extreme extent it is in America at the moment. So I don't think we can separate it between what's happening politically either.
Well,
And
I actually, yeah, I was
you
speaking
know,
about that earlier on today with our friend of Brit Avengers friend Matt Allen. Hey to you, we love you if you're listening. And actually, I think we do see this exact thing replicated in the United Kingdom across the Western world. We're seeing really extreme views being upheld, and it's just becoming super polarized, and the very easy target for that is the queer community, and specifically the trans community. We're seeing respected wealthy people who are weighing in and effectively leading online lynch mobs against the trans community. Valerie, you are incredibly, you're a huge lover of sport, right? You are involved there, and some of the stuff that you hear is really painful, right? It's horrible.
Yeah, I was my local. I'm an avid tennis player. I play 5 times a week on women's USTA teams and other things. And the local USTA director for Pride Month, it was this year, I think, asked if we could do an article about me. And so it's out on the USTA website. You can go look up USTA
Yeah,
Valerie Green and find this article.
we'll drop a link. Yeah.
And so I've watched to see how many thumbs up and thumbs down go on that article. The government people don't read the USTA website. It's not particularly it's not a social media environment. And I figure we're more than half are favorable. So I figured that was pretty good in today's climate. And regarding sport, we just watched Imani Khalif get just lambasted everywhere. I don't know how much this was going on in the UK.
Yeah.
Well, you have she who must not be named over there. So
Right.
and
Yes, we do, and
yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. And
Any,
I was sort of considering this earlier on. I mean, we had it's just the vitriol, what is happening, seeing how this subject is being used to further some kind of agenda, whatever that is. When the well-loved famous five books with George would have been, this very sort of tomboy character, back in the days, very, very well beloved, and a character that she was adored and worshipped by children all over the world. That would have been, J.K. Rowling would have hounded Enid Blyton about that one, because we're just so determined to hunt out the threat. And at the moment, the threat is transgender individuals. And from this policy, you can see this is quarantining a risk. That's certainly how I would see it.
yeah, I've seen in the political world, I've seen for the last 4 or 8 years, just the leaders are giving everyone permission to behave badly.
Mm.
And I think it's happening here. And I think it's funny, a friend of mine was talking about a conversation they had in a Canadian ward, and someone said, why should we be accommodating to such a small percentage of people? And my reply was, do you know what smaller percentage of people Mormons are? And you expect everyone to look at you as the leaders of the world? And you're the only people with truth, and you're like 0.002% of the world population? Let's talk about who expects who to cater to whom.
There's a wonderful comment in the chat that I want to just read out. Our Scottish lassie, Mary Curry, we love you, makes this wonderful point, and I think it's so true. If members in general have been accepting of others in their wards, then I really can't see them changing their attitudes regardless of what Oak says. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I absolutely love that statement. I love it. But back to what we've said over and over again about safeguarding, we believe what people do, not what people say. So for that to be true, what we need to see is members on the ground actually saying, I am not that, no, that policy is not working for me. I'm going to go into the toilets, come in with me.
Right.
You could be in there at the same time as me.
Oh my goodness. I mean,
Let's make it work.
Yeah.
In the favour of our trans brothers and sisters. Don't sit back and think, well, there's not really anything we can do about it. It would be great if people have been accepting, if they continue that acceptance. But we know that very, very sadly, some people will worry about how they are seen to be loyal to the organisation and still a strong ally with their gay brothers and sisters and trans brothers and sisters. It puts people in a really difficult position.
It does, and I liked what you said earlier, Sarah. I sustain the prophet, but I know in my heart what I feel that sustaining is. But I follow Christ, and if I have to sit outside with a sister who can't go into Relief Society, I will sit outside, because my baptismal covenant was to mourn with them and sit with them. And I trust Latter-day Saints to do that, the ones I know anyway, and the ones I've come into contact. I trust them to do that.
You're all in such great
most
words.
will.
Yeah.
Most people will, because most people are loving and compassionate and will see the ridiculousness of this and will want to do that and will want to be that person that shows Christ-like love and that lives the gospel.
However, if we see these Christ-like loving people's hands be tied because if they don't adhere to a policy that somehow that makes them less faithful, I think that's the worry. I do have a fundamental belief that people in general are good people, and that Latter-day Saints are trying their best to be good people. Absolutely. What I would say also, and I know I'll sound sassy when I say this, but I genuinely mean it. When you are having an awful time at church, well, when you're having an awful time anywhere, but we're talking about church at the moment, particularly kids again. If you are having a panic attack, if you have experienced any kind of trauma, if you are just really upset and tearful, if you haven't left, where do you go? You go to the toilet, and you could potentially be spending quite some time in there, regulating and just sort of calming down. Those things aren't considered in this. What if you just need time and space, and so yes, to be a relief society that will not just wait outside the bathroom door for you to be finished. We're going to help you where you need to be helped. We're going to make sure that you have a safe space. You're going to the bathroom. I need to go to. I need to. I need to. Yeah, freshen up too.
I mean, there's something rather horrific about the humiliation of having to stand outside a bathroom while a trusted person goes in and checks the bathroom's empty before you can go in there.
It's
and it
not
brings
acceptable.
Us back. It isn't. You remember that poem? What was it that I can't remember? But back first they came for the Roman Catholics and I didn't speak out because I wasn't Catholic. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a unionist. Then they came for me. There was no one left to speak out for me. We're kind
It's
of
not
there.
acceptable, but if, oh my goodness, supposing I had to have an impromptu Relief Society class in the damn bathroom. I mean, what are they going to do, drag everyone out? And I think we can get really creative about, because all of us here on some level, and we're talking with Sarah and I are talking with two women here. You're going nowhere. The church is really important to you. This is what you've chosen. This is the road you're walking. So, we could be having conversations about how not fit for purpose this policy's here. and hopefully they will do a U-turn on it, like the first policy of
They will.
exclusion.
They will.
I would love to see that happen. But in the meantime, what work are we actually going to do to make sure that we can make this place as safe as possible for you, and that you do get to feel not just included, but as Sarah would say, belong, that this is your church, and how dare anyone, marginalize you, throw Jesus under the bus by saying this is somehow in his name. Debbie, I loved your approach on Facebook this week, because you've made a really clear statement. You sustain the profit, and I love that. I think that's such a clear statement to make for where your heart is at. Position 1, I sustain the profit. Position 2, this is really hard, and you took that to Facebook. Could you talk a little bit about how constructive you hope to be? What was that Facebook experience like? Because I was very impressed when I was reading through your approach.
Well, first of all, sometimes I think I put too much on Facebook. But the reason I put this up is I really feel that when Joseph Smith said, I love this brother, a brother who was suffering, and everybody was giving him words of comfort, and he said, I love this brother and comfort this brother to the tune of $5. So that was my $5 offering on Facebook, to say to trans brothers and sisters, like, I'm sitting with you. I don't want to hear from anybody who is angry about trans rights. I just want us to spend this moment just to sit with them. And I suppose I feel that, I don't know if you heard Barack Obama's speech yesterday. It's just amazing, him and Michelle, just amazing speech. But what he did say, he started to talk about not making enemies of people who don't agree with you. Sit with them and explain your position, and if they're not understanding, because of, he talked about, older generation grands and grannies who don't understand things, like, don't get angry with them. And I'm talking as an ally, not as obviously somebody who's trans or gay. I don't expect them to do this. This is too painful for them. But us as members, as rank and file members, can be allies by supporting our trans sisters and brothers. We can also help in the education and understanding of those who find this very difficult and are fearful, because they might have had different experiences being brought up, or they might be aged and find this difficult. And there's no point in getting angry with them or not trying to understand them as well. And I feel that if we are gentle with them as well, and try and understand them, and helping them see things in a different light, we can use that two-pronged attack. And that was kind of what I wanted to do on my Facebook page today.
And there wasn't this
that.
process of we have to educate you, we're going to fill you with facts, which is great. That's really good. So, making facts available is a wonderful thing. You were making sure that there was a space for people to hurt, and that this was a safe place for people to hurt, and that if you can feel hurt, then it's not crazy that, because I was really uncomfortable about this too, and yeah, it does hurt, and I can verbalize it now because you gave me the permission to acknowledge the hurt. Never mind someone who it actually affects, and I know that you're an ally. I know that you're safe. I know I can tell you that. You also, are you comfortable to share this? You shared a really cool thing, which was a Google Doc. Would you be comfortable to mention that? I thought this was great.
I don't even know where that came from. That was I don't know who put that up, but I asked permission. I can't remember. It was in one of the groups, and yes, somebody has put that together to send to the first presidency. So I just asked, and I put it up there, and I said, look, if you have an opinion about this, you know, put down your opinion. And I feel that there are spaces and places for people to rightly rant and be upset. But if you want people to listen to you, who's not in the same space as you, you have to be thoughtful in what you say, because you have to articulate it so that they can understand what you're getting at, the real nub of what you're getting at. And so that's what, just a request of saying, if you're going to reply to this, be thoughtful how you express yourself, because then it's better accepted.
Can I just say, I love that you've said that, Debbie, and I think that's a really powerful message that needs to come out tonight. And believe it or not, I might go all ranty when I'm talking about this, but actually when I'm sitting in conversations with church leaders and bishops and state presidents and church lawyers and various people that we've sat in conversation with around safeguarding for the last 2 years, I know, and I know from my professional career, that you don't achieve any change by being angry with people or blaming people or being punitive with people. You achieve change by being respectful and kind and establishing a dialogue and a relationship of trust and having those conversations in a calm way, because otherwise people don't listen to what you're saying. They just ignore it. And I think there's a space and a time when, for me, a space of time when I will get angry about how I feel and how I think about things. Like, sometimes I think even Jane told me to stop using social media this week, in all honesty. But
I did.
That's one of our Emmaus principles when we have people work with local leaders, is to find out where those local leaders are and find out what you can do with them, what they're comfortable with, because as you do that, then they will learn. And as they learn, they will become, that's the wrong word, more permissive is not the right word, but it gets the right idea across. So they'll start learning what they can do.
Well, they become informed and understanding. And what we have had leaders and lawyers and people say to us in the church is, actually, you've really made me completely rethink what about safeguarding and abuse. You've made me rethink it. I've done a 36-degree turn because we've approached it in that way. And we have to approach this in the same way.
Yep.
Now, I'm not going to promise you I'm always going to do that, but I actually know that that's the effective way. Jane,
and sort of,
but that's how we need to approach it. And when I have a face-to-face conversation, that is going to come on the back of the letter I've written this week. It is going to come. It will be a very respectful, calm, loving conversation.
Let's just say we could have followed up our letter, that we sent a little while back to all the bishops.
We did talk about doing that.
This new policy is terrible safeguarding. I mean, if you all want us to write a letter, just watch this episode. It will save us time. We think this is an appalling idea and is discriminatory and
we
terrible.
did think of writing to every bishop in the country again, didn't we? But we thought we probably wouldn't do that at the moment. But not at the moment.
Let's boost the idea of contacting church leaders, the idea of people coming together with these Google Docs, the idea of safe spaces where people can just talk about it. I'm going to, before I say this other one, I just want to translate for people in the comments if you're reading. There's a comment that says women won't wished. Now the final word of that means be silent or hush or shush. So women won't wish. Absolutely, it's not in our nature, and we will speak out. But yes, the other thing that I think is so important, we could have filled tonight with stats, with medical and psychological evidence, studies, information to explain why this is not a group that should be marginalized. This is a group that you need to understand a bit better, because clearly what you're thinking is not lining up with reality. It's non-scientific, this approach. It doesn't make sense. But I think one of the most incredible things that can happen if people are able to give of that is are you friends with many trans people? Do you know the people that are going to be affected by these policies? Because let me tell you, they'll be hurting, and let me tell you that they are, if you don't know any of them, they are so much more amazing than the media is telling you to be afraid and fearful, that there's a huge risk factor. Whereas the opposite is true. This is a demographic of people who are more at risk than are likely to perpetrate harm. Were we to look at the safety aspect of bathroom visits, then no white man would be able to go to the bathroom at church. And that's just a simple fact. That's statistically, that's the risk. And of course we don't do that because it's nonsensical and doesn't make sense. I think when we listen to the voices of people who are affected by these policies, and even if it wasn't about these policies, oh my goodness, this not just church community is so much better with Valerie in it, able to serve, and for us to be able to serve her. But the world is so much better. I am able to understand things about how the world works that I didn't understand before. I'm able to understand um, pain that I wouldn't have thought people could experience before. I'm able to be more hopefully compassionate, empathetic, to know that people are reaching out in love and trying to understand, and that this incredible woman. We first met Valerie because you came onto the show with your best friend, and the relationship between these two women is phenomenal. There was this incredible presentation, and we're going to need to share that again. Oh my goodness, we have so much to learn. And to deny ourselves those opportunities because we have decided we're going to keep a hold of these concrete ideas that are simply, they are not true. They are not true. Um, yes, I don't believe that this is a godly policy. We talked about this around about a year ago, Sarah, right? When we heard the rumours that this policy was going to be put in place, we did an urgent broadcast, and absolutely put it on the line that we don't believe that this is the correct approach, and we had hoped that this wouldn't happen. And I am so I know I speak for us all that we are so sorry that it is here. But what I know that we can commit to do, people who want to do it, can commit to making this, to minimizing its effects, to making this as healthy as it possibly can be until they get a grip and it dies. And it's my sincere hope and belief that it will. We're going to close out. Let's go around, and I want to leave the closing thoughts for Valerie, the most important voice in this discussion tonight. So let's start with you, Sarah, then we'll come to Debbie, and then we'll go to Valerie. Sarah, any final thoughts that you would like to share tonight? Oh, have I muted? I may have muted you because there was some background noise. Sorry.
I'd like to just throw out a couple of thought questions for people to go away and ponder, and to maybe discuss with family and friends. And Relief Society and Priesthood are meant to have a few minutes counselling together about problems and concerns at the start of their meetings now, aren't they? So maybe they could discuss these questions there. The one is probably too controversial to discuss in church, but can people just for a short while ponder and reflect on whether they truly believe there is rejoicing in heaven over the implementation of this policy? Right, ponder and reflect. Do we really believe there is rejoicing in heaven about this policy? And if we do, then okay, that's fair enough. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, their belief, and their faith. If we don't, then what can we do to make it better? And the other one is, does this policy fit with our moral compass? And if it does, because we believe it's the right direction for the church, then, as I say, everybody is entitled to their faith and their own interpretation of what they believe is right and the will of God. If we think it doesn't fit with our moral compass and it disturbs us on any level whatsoever, how can we live the gospel of Jesus Christ while being faithfully attending church? But how can we live the gospel and include our trans brothers and sisters that might be hurting a lot at the moment? How can we do that incredibly difficult space of being an active temple attending member, having a state calling, being a member of the church? How can we do that and make sure at the same time we're including our trans brothers and sisters? If there's rejoicing in heaven over this policy, it's easy. If there isn't, we've got some questions to ask ourselves as a church.
Well put, Sarah. Thank you so much. Debbie, would you share some final thoughts and maybe speak also about the hope and potential that you see?
Yeah, well, my hope is that it's not going to last very long and there'll be a reversal very quickly. That's my hope. I know it's very difficult for I'm quite vocal about what I believe and what I think is wrong and harmful. But even I sometimes feel as I have to put a lid on it for different reasons. So I think I'm kind of asking similar to what Sarah's asking, but maybe those of us who have got both feet in the church and fear for our status sometimes. Think about, though, what's in your heart. Think about what the Holy Ghost is saying to you. And think about how Christ wants us to treat each other. And act upon that. Act upon that love. And Valerie, I'm just so sorry. Like, that's all I can say, really.
Thank you so much, dear friend. Valerie, would you share with us some final thoughts as we wrap up?
Yeah, as you were talking about what people can do, I was reminded of my first real Relief Society president, who came to me and said, I know you can't come to Relief Society, but there are so many things that aren't official that I can invite you to, and I'll make sure you get to come to every one of those. And then she went on to do other amazing things on my behalf, which I was really grateful for. I'm hopeful that this might get reversed, but I'm not very hopeful because it's very similar to what was unofficially the policy prior to 2020. So we'll see how things go. I'm glad you invited me today, because on Monday I was thinking this might be the final straw with my affiliation with the church. I'm not going to like going to church, knowing that on alternate Sundays I'll just be leaving again after sacrament meeting, which I did for a little over a year before I was officially invited to Relief Society. So this will be painful. Like the last policy they put out, I wasn't greatly affected because I've been ordained. I was a high priest. I've been sealed in the temple. All the things that were excluded were things that had already been milestones in my relationship with the church and the gospel, except for meetings and community and inclusion. And so watching them go back to exclusion, or what they think is probably inclusion, but in a completely wrong way, is disappointing. And it does make me wonder how much longer I will be able to do it, and I don't know. So I'm again, hopeful that things change. I don't have a lot of hope that they will, but we'll see how things go. It's going to be a rough ride, I think, for a little while.
I am so sorry that it has come to this point. I think we've been able to hear just the strength of faith of the people in this conversation tonight. Um the trying to make it work for such a long time in spite of having so many barriers is exhausting. It's the work is exhausting. It's my hope that while, because I agree, I think under the radar these have been the unofficial policies, and people have been, leaders have been trying to uh make sure that people are as involved in church as they can possibly be. It's my hope that by shining a light and, this being put in black and white, perhaps if there's anything good that does come of it, is that we can look at it analytically and be able to say, okay, this makes no sense, this is harmful, and we need to, this is not of God. It's my real hope that this is where we will see, we talked about the grassroots difference, and that's where change really comes. I have so much hope for that to be the case, because this is how people can stay in the churches when you have a really good ward, when you have a really supportive bunch of leaders and a really good stake president, and communication is happening, and you have relationships with all of these people. That's where the wonderful stuff happens. It's my hope that if someone had to leave church on a Sunday because they weren't welcome into the class of their gender, that class happens out with church, that we all leave, come to my place, we'll do it at my place. I would love to see that. I would love to see welcome signs on the bathroom and people who have to spend their time there to make sure that everyone is safe who can go, that people will contact their church leadership, that people will contact their area leadership, that you will do all you can, most importantly, to reach out to the people who may be affected by this. Now, what's even more difficult is going to be to find and reach out to the people that you don't know if they may be affected by it. The median age for sort of leaving the church seems to be around about according to the research done by Jana Rees, seems to be about the age of 19 years old. And we can safely say that that research has pointed to the fact that this demographic of members of the church are more supportive. They are many of them are part of the LGBTQ community, that they have these concerns. This policy is likely to push so many people either closer to the margins or out of the door completely. That's possibly one of the better outcomes, because the worst is that someone doesn't feel safe, that someone can't tell their family, they can't confide in a church leader anymore, because were they to do that, guardians have to become involved and church policies now have to be enacted. We cannot have people be put into that position. This policy, categorically, from 21st Century Saints, we are telling you this is not safe. Everyone should feel safe at church. Everyone should feel loved at church. And if we are not meeting those two standards, then we are not doing church right. I just want to thank, again, the ladies who have joined us tonight have done so on such short notice. We really, really appreciate you both and the great work that you do. And I just want to share just a quick blessing for you, especially Valerie. We bless you that you will be strengthened as you go through this next period of time where we see what this is actually going to look like in practice, that we bless you that you will find love and compassion and as much support as can be, that you are strengthened and upheld by that. And we're just so thankful to have you in our lives. You are such fun and an inspiration, and I cannot believe anybody has made me actually think tennis is cool. You did that. I
you.
have no idea what any of it means, but it is badass. I can tell you that. So thank you for everything that you do and for your ministry.
By the way, tennis makes you live longer. Just want to let you know that.
I don't understand the scoring system. It just I don't, and maybe if it was just hitting a ball and I lighten up about scoring, maybe I would be fine. But yes, he makes it look so cool. So cool. Thank you to everyone who was with us tonight in the comments. We love you. We might see you in October, possibly before. Who knows? We may have opened the genie off out of the ball. I don't know. We'll see. We just wanted to let you know that this is a really important conversation that we needed to have, and we encourage you to go out there and start having it too, in whatever safe way that looks for you. Be safe, y'all. Take care, and we bless your journeys. Good night.
Thank you.